So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Liz Sands. Liz is the outreach coordinator at Common Ground Food Cooperative. She's a Champaign native who studied anthropology at the University of Illinois at Chicago, after which she spent 6 years working as a bartender. Liz is excited to be here today to combine the exciting world of cocktails with teaching about our dynamic food system.
So bitters are wonderful in cocktails. They just add a really unique and complex flavor profile. They've been around for a really long time. Initially, they were just used medicinally in different drinks or in wines. And then as they sort of gained traction, they've been used in cocktails. The most popular you've probably seen is I probably won't say this correctly, but the Angostura are orange bitters. So those are in old fashions. People use the yellow kind as well. And then there's the Peychaud's bitters, which are in the Sazerac. If you've ever been to New Orleans or had a Sazerac, they're pink. And so with bitters, it's essentially just herbs or bark or roots and different natural materials and herbs that go into liquor. So in our case, we're using our Down East vodka again. And when you put it in a cocktail, you use just a tiny, tiny amount. If you have a dropper bottle, that would be ideal for when you're actually making the cocktail. So you can just drop 1 or 2 or 3. But otherwise, I would just try and find a spoon like this, put just a tiny, tiny amount and just kind of very delicately add it to your cocktail. You really don't want a lot. There's already liquor in it and the flavors are pretty strong. As the name implies, a lot of times they are kind of bitter. This is kind of a different one. We're using lavender and orange peel and rose petals and ginger. So it's kind of a twist on that. It's much more floral than you might find otherwise. But if you go to a Binny's or like a really fancy cocktail bar like here in town, Punch, I think they have a whole wall of bitters. You can really make them with almost anything. I have some coffee ones at home. You can really switch it up a lot. So basically what we want to do is grind these up a little bit. Again, if you don't have the proper equipment, that's okay. A mortar and pestle worked really well. My muddler that I have has grooves on it, so that'll probably be really helpful. But I did it the other day with just a spoon and it'll be okay. But because we have these rose buds instead of the petals, we're going to do those first. So just grab a bowl and put those in and try and just break those open. Shouldn't take too much work.
Liz, Amy asked how much rose petals should she be muddling?
Yeah, a tablespoon.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to add the lavender next. The orange peel and the ginger are already pretty well broken down. So I'm just going to dump my lavender in there. And it already smells so good. I love lavender. And again, if you wanted to get it into really fine powder and you wanted to grind it up with a mortar or pestle in a coffee grinder, that's fine. But just don't spend too much time with it. It'll all work out in the end. It's going to get infused and it's going to get strained and it's going to be delicious. So I'm just going to go over this a few times with my muddler. Doesn't really look like too much is happening, but it is breaking down a little bit. All right, I'm going to add the rest of it and just maybe spend 1 more minute on this. Because we're not putting it into a super, super fine powder, it is really important that when you strain it, you use a cheesecloth or a coffee filter. Just using a strainer, you'll have all of these little pieces in there, and that's not what we want. We just want the liquid. But if you don't have a cheesecloth, I used just a normal coffee filter before and it worked just fine. All right. So for this one, there is a measurement on the recipes for vodka, but really what's important is that the herbs are properly covered, but that there's still room to there's still liquid in there. So when I made them the second time the other day, the jar I had wasn't quite big enough. And so I added a little bit more vodka to it, or sorry, it was too big. So I added a little bit more vodka because you want to be able to, you don't want it to soak everything up right away. And that so it's not being like, so you can't shake it around. So for example, this is the one that I made the other day and there's plenty of liquid in there and you can actually like really shake it and mix everything up. So if you have to put it in a container and then find a different one or add a little bit more vodka, it's all good, whatever works for what you have at home. I will just spoon it into my measuring cup and then pour it in. When we add the vodka, I'm not even going to measure it. I'm just going to fill it up and make sure that it goes above the herbs. So for mine right here, it's probably going to be full. And it's about a cup to a cup and a half, but you just want to make sure that there's room for liquid above the herbs. So you can keep shaking it up. It's going to look a little crazy for the first couple of days. It might look a little separated, but it becomes a little bit more uniform. Just make sure that you, just keep it somewhere that you are a lot. So just like by your sink or in the kitchen, and just when you see it, give it a shake. It's kind of fun. And it just looks really crazy. And after like 3 days or so, open it up and give it a smell. It smells amazing already. The lavender and the rose work really, really well together. And when it comes time to make the cocktail, so I'll show you how to strain it out. You really just want to use a little bit. So again, this cocktail that I have for when it's ready is incredibly simple. It's, we're calling it a martini. It's not like a classic martini, but it's vodka and lemon juice, simple syrup. For this one, right, just regular simple syrup. I would not recommend using the fennel. But now you know how to make it. Just don't put the fennel in. It's just sugar and water. Or you can buy simple syrup too at the store, but it's so easy to make. And then a little bit of the lavender bitters and a lemon peel. So you'll put that in a cocktail shaker if you have one. Otherwise, just make sure it gets nice and cold and strain it out. So we don't want any ice in this one. We just want the drink, and it is very delicious. So yeah, just make sure that there's a little bit of room in the jar. If after a day you notice that you really can't see the liquid and it's kind of soaking up all of the herbs, either just move it to a different jar or add a little bit more vodka. It's all just going to be infused. It's not going to make anything, much, much stronger or alter the flavor a lot. You just want to make sure there's enough liquid in there to work with the herbs. So I will take the one I made a few weeks ago. And again, kind of a messy process, but I am just going to use a coffee filter over a strainer. And I seem to have run out of jars, so I'm just going to find a bowl to put this in for now. I'll use this cup so we can kind of get a visual on what the colors look like. So I'm gonna give it one more shake before I go forward. And then just pour it in. And again, it's going to take a little bit of time. With this one, you'll definitely want to grab a spoon or something as it gets to the bottom so you can really press out all of the liquid. Which I'm going to do now. So I may or may not do the whole jar to show you just because it is a bit of a tedious process. You just want to keep going until you get as much liquid as you possibly can. Because there's so much in there, if you were to utilize mortar pestle, a coffee grinder, this process will be a little bit easier because you won't be having to go through so many solid pieces. But if you don't have that equipment, then this is fine. It just is going to take a little bit longer. Do a little bit more so I can try and show the color. And I will admit the solid part of this right now does not look particularly appetizing, but the bitters themselves are a really, really nice addition. The lavender really, really comes through, and the rose petals are really nice as well. If you miss a day of shaking it, it's not going to ruin it by any means, but it is kind of fun to just check in on it. So I'd recommend putting it somewhere that you are a lot and writing it down on a calendar so you know 2 weeks, you might forget in 2 weeks what you did today. Okay, we will stop there for the bitters. So it's I'm not sure how well you can see it. It's pretty cloudy. It looks, I don't really know what to compare it to, but yeah, if you smell it, you're mostly going to get the lavender and the rose and vodka. So it does retain, it definitely smells boozy. So you really, really just want to use a little bit. If you were to put a whole spoonful in a drink, I don't know what would, it wouldn't be good. I've never had that much at one time, but it's not what you want. It's really just a couple of drops. The flavor is so strong that it really works to infuse the whole drink, and you just need a tiny, tiny bit. So if you do have like here at Common Ground, we have all of the Herb Farm tonics and extracts. If you have any of those, save one of the bottles. That's really, really great to use. That's what I did last time. I'm sure you can buy just dropper bottles places too. But if not, just a little tiny bar spoon, and just kind of work slowly, like 1, 2, and just little tiny droplets in there. The bitters, if they're stored properly, will last a couple months, and they are pretty shelf stable. Just make sure if you get like the dropper bottle, just a really, really tightly sealed container.